Hello, scientists. So today we are going to talk about asexual reproduction. Remember, we did talk about sexual reproduction on Friday, and that only requires one day because it's pretty simple. There's really only one type of sexual reproduction in which the sex cells are produced, which is meiosis. And we talked about some characteristics and some advantages and disadvantages. So we're going to go through that as well with asexual reproduction, but you're going to see there's kind of some differences as well as a couple more types of ways that organisms can undergo asexual reproduction. So let's get started. So you don't have to worry about this slide. Again, this is just used for in class time. And we're going to talk about the key terms. Remember, our key terms are the ones that we're going to see throughout the unit. We have already talked about sexual reproduction. We're going to learn today about asexual. We talked about meiosis. Remember, that's the process the cells undergo to become sex cells. We talked about sperm and egg and fertilization. And through the process of fertilization with when egg and sperm combine, they produce that new cell called a zygote. And we're also going to talk about these other ones today, which are budding, cloning, fission, regeneration, and vegetative reproduction. So let's get started. So asexual reproduction is a process when one parent organism produces offspring without meiosis and fertilization. So again, neither meiosis nor fertilization occurs. An easier way to remember this is asexual reproduction is when one organism or one cell reproduces by itself without a mate and produces an offspring that is genetically identical to the parent. Remember, that is the big difference between sexual and asexual reproduction is the offspring. In sexual reproduction, the offspring is genetically different, while in asexual reproduction, the offspring is genetically identical to the parent. So let's talk about some different types. There's actually 6 of them, and this just kind of gives us a little bit of a heads up of what we're going to talk about, but we're going to go into each of these more in depth. So today we're going to talk about fission, and we're going to talk about mitosis and budding. So fission is cell division in prokaryotes that forms 2 genetically identical cells. This is very, very similar to mitosis. The difference is that fission is only used in prokaryotes. Remember, prokaryotes, pro rhymes with no, so they have no nucleus, while mitosis is used in eukaryotic cells. And that's very similar to the process of meiosis, but they create identical body cells. And finally, budding is a new organism that grows on the body of its parent. Some other ones that we might have a chance to talk about today, I'm not sure how long this video is going to last, so that's kind of going to determine it. But if not, we're going to talk about it on Tuesday. If not today, is regeneration, which is when offspring grows from a piece of the parent plant. Vegetative reproduction, which is offspring's going to grow from the part of a parent plant. Plant is the key term there. Remember, vegetative kind of sounds like vegetation, meaning plants. So that's how you can tell the difference. And finally, cloning, actually we're going to talk about as a form of asexual reproduction, which is actually performed in a laboratory and uses cells from past organisms to create a new identical organism from the past. So let's start with talking about fission. So fission, remember, is cell division, and it only occurs in prokaryotes. That's going to be the big difference. In prokaryotes, they don't have a nucleus, but they also need to reproduce, and they do so by fission. Now, fission can also be called binary fission. It's just the same terminology. You can just shorten it to fission. Either one of those is going to work. But fission or binary fission is going to create 2 genetically identical cells from prokaryotic organisms. So in terms of the process, you can see it says the first step is that DNA molecule is going to be copied and attached to the cell membrane. Remember when we talked about meiosis in class, the first step was that the nuclear membrane had to be opened. Well, that's not the first step here for fission because this occurs in prokaryotes and they don't have a nucleus, so that nuclear membrane doesn't exist because there's no nucleus. So that step is not needed. The DNA is already going to be free floating in the cell, so that DNA molecule can automatically be copied, and it's going to attach to the cell membrane because it doesn't have those centrioles in it. Because remember, centrioles are only in animal cells, and animals are eukaryotic cells. Now, step 2. The cell's going to then elongate, pulling the DNA apart in different directions. Then the cell membrane is going to start to pinch in the middle, and the cell's going to split and it's going to form 2 identical offspring. An example of this is E. coli. And remember, E. coli is the type of bacteria, it kind of gives you a bad stomach ache, but bacteria are really going to undergo fission or binary fission, as it's also called. If we quickly just look at this picture to reiterate what I just said, remember there's no nuclear membrane, so the DNA doesn't have to split out. It's just going to be free floating in the cell. It's actually going to be copied, and then in doing so, the cell membrane is going to start to pinch into the center and eventually is going to split entirely and form 2 different cells that are genetically identical. The next type of asexual reproduction is mitosis. And mitosis, you're going to notice, has the exact same steps of meiosis, except it only undergoes those steps once, not twice. The other difference is that mitosis is used to create body cells. They're not going to be your reproductive cells, such as sperm or egg. Only body cells, so this is going to be your skin cells, for example. And the other difference between mitosis and meiosis is going to be that it only is going, that the cells are going to be genetically identical, not genetically different from the parent cell. So again, remember what we talked about in class. I'm going to actually go to the next page for the picture. The interphase actually starts at the beginning of it, and that's when stuff is copied, but we didn't really talk about that, so you don't need to worry about that for this picture. But remember, in prophase, the nuclear membrane is going to split open. Those chromosomes are going to split out into the cell, and the centrioles are going to be there ready to be activated for metaphase. And in metaphase, remember, spindle fibers are going to connect to the chromosomes, which is that DNA material, and the chromosomes line up in the center of the cell. And then the centrioles with their spindle fibers are going to pull the chromosomes to opposite sides of the cell, so different poles of the cell. And the cellular membrane, as you can see, starts to get pinched a little bit. And then finally in telophase, they're going to be completely pulled apart. The nuclear membrane is going to reform, and those 2 cells are going to split into identical cells. And that's all mitosis is. Mitosis does not keep occurring like that because they are genetically identical to the parent. So, quickly, I want you guys to answer this question. How is mitosis different from meiosis? So if you want to maybe just pause this video, you can write in this green box. Remember, don't be in present mode, so you can actually type, I would like to see your responses, because you are going to submit this PowerPoint onto Schoology at the end of the PowerPoint if we finish it today. If not, you will turn it in on Tuesday. So how is mitosis different from meiosis? One way that it might be different, mitosis is for body cells, while meiosis is for your sex cells. Another difference, mitosis creates identical daughter cells, while meiosis creates genetically different daughter cells. Lastly, another difference, mitosis only creates 2 new cells, while meiosis creates 4 new daughter cells. So any of those would work in terms of differences between mitosis and meiosis. Okay, so let's quickly talk about budding. Budding occurs in organisms that are kind of simple as well, and they're new, and it's when a new organism grows from the body of the parent. So it's actually attached to the parent itself. But the bud is genetically identical to that parent. So the easy way to think about this is that basically if I used asexual reproduction to reproduce and I used budding, there would be me, my normal size self, And then if I was reproducing, there would be a little Miss Schisler up here, say, growing off my shoulder. That's going to grow so big, and then it's going to go bloop and fall off, and it's going to grow into the exact same copy of me. So there would now be two Miss Schislers. And this would just keep occurring and reoccurring. So as you can see, when the bud breaks off, it says that it can live on its own, of course. Sometimes the bud chooses not to leave the parent. So this would be Miss Schisler stays up here, and then it can start forming a colony because that bud can then also start to reproduce. So some examples of organisms that undergo budding. The prokaryotic organism is going to be a hydra, and that's like a little freshwater organism. We're actually going to see what it looks like in the next picture on the next slide. And also unicellular eukaryotic organisms such as yeast. So very simple organisms are going to create this budding. Remember, it's going to be a little miniature one growing off the body of the parent, and it's just going to kind of blurp and drop off. So this is budding through the hydra, and hydras actually look like this. Remember, they're little freshwater organisms. So you have the parent, and eventually over time as it's reproducing, they're just going to start getting this little bud on the side of the hydra. And it's eventually going to grow, and then it's going to go pop and pop off of the parent and grow sometimes usually pretty near it. And then that young one is going to grow up to a full size, and eventually this process is going to repeat. And so this original parent is going to be able to reproduce again, and now this young that has grown up is going to also be able to go through these steps as well, and it creates a lot of different colonies and such. Okay, so the last one we're going to talk about today is regeneration. And regeneration is offspring that grows from a piece of its parent. So this is not growing on the actual parent. This is growing from a piece of the parent. But it reproduces a new organism, not a part. So remember how I told you that like in certain body parts, such as our organs, it's actually able to grow back if you like take a piece of it? This isn't the same thing. While that's a type of regeneration, this is talking about regeneration of a whole new organism. And one example that we actually saw in that reproduction activity, remember, was the sea star. So each sea star, each arm has the potential to grow into a new sea star. So a total of 5. However, each piece has to contain this part of the central disc for it to become a new organism. So it has to have a piece of the parent plant to, sea star to reproduce and grow into a new organism. Some other examples of organisms that undergo regeneration is going to be a sea urchin, sea cucumbers, sponges, and planarians. So typically they're actually found in the ocean, as you can tell. It's just a way for them to be able to reproduce by themselves. Remember, it's something that grows from a piece of the parent. So it'd be like if I was reproducing through regeneration, it would be, say, my arm would fall off and my arm would eventually grow a whole nother Miss Schisler. It wouldn't be growing on me, but grow separately from a piece of me. Just to quickly show you this, in the starfish, you can see if an arm falls off, in this case, 2 arms fell off, not only is that piece that got broken off going to grow into a new sea star or a starfish, but the old piece is also going to grow and fix itself and be able to be a whole organism again. Another one that you often see is going to be this planaria, or this it's also a flatworm is called. As you can see, it can break into multiple parts. So if you split it in half, that part is going to regenerate and grow into a new organism, while the bottom part is also going to do that. And another organism that you might see doing this is actually the earthworm. The earthworm is known for doing that as well. All right, so just real quickly, last question for you guys to answer for today is, what is one type of asexual reproduction that we learned about so far, and just briefly explain those processes. So this could have been budding, regeneration, mitosis, or I forget what the other one we talked about, the first one. Oh, fission, binary fission. Any of those would work. So remember, you can just write in that box there, the orange one. Don't be in present mode. And we're going to end this here today, and we'll learn about the rest of them on Tuesday. So have a good day, scientists. I'll see you then.